We're going to start off talking about student loans again. We've been talking about student loans a lot lately because it is the big thing for the socialists now, to try to give everyone their money back, having made the mistake of entering the compassion program known as federally subsidized student loans, and seeing that it just made a disaster of their lives and the finances of the country. It's such an enormous mistake, this whole thing. And now paying it off is a way to get people out from under the obligations they made. But what a crazy idea. What a crazy idea it was to give the loans and now to write them off. Here to talk to us about it is Neetu Arnold. Neetu is a research fellow at the National Association of Scholars. I don't know what that is, Neetu, but it sounds fancy and lofty.
Well, we're an education watchdog group, and I thought what you said, the word compassionate, I think that's an interesting word that some people describe this debt forgiveness, because I actually don't see it as compassionate. I don't see it as compassionate to the taxpayers who are under the expectation that these loans would be paid back. And it's also not compassionate to the students who we give these loans out. We don't consider whether they're academically prepared or whether they're entering programs with a good return on investment. So the government is just giving their stamp of approval regardless of how the student will do. And I think that's a major reason for why we're in this mess in the first place.
Well, that's what compassion means. It means a horrible experience for the people who are getting the gift and a worse experience for the people who are having the money stolen from them to give the gift. So that's what, they called it a compassion program to have the student loans. And it's like we live in this big disconnected world, Neetu, where nobody even says to them, by the way, do you recall that this was something you put in place to help people? And now you're out there arguing that it hurts people so badly we have to give them their money back?
I think it's ridiculous that we don't see this in any other industry. If you take out a mortgage, if you have credit card debt, we don't expect the banks or other people involved to repay the borrowers. So this is a huge problem. What's interesting is that the Biden administration, this is a second attempt at massive forgiveness. It's going to affect 30 million borrowers. There are various groups that he's trying to help. So those who entered repayment at least 20 years ago, if you have unpaid interest up to $20,000, that could be forgiven. And then he also includes a category of people who are facing hardship. That is not defined. So right now it's an ambiguous term. That I don't think that's going to set a great precedent. You could claim hardship for anything. So again, this is it's not a loan forgiveness program. It's a transfer scheme.
So the this idea, it was tried before by Joe Biden. He had a bigger thing he wanted to do before, a bigger bailout, and that was turned down by the courts. And is this one going to go through the same review? And is it liable? It's not the same program, so the laws applying to it are different, but it could be that the underlying principles are the same and that the court would reject it again. Is that possible?
So we should expect this plan to go up to the Supreme Court again. When it comes to loan forgiveness, this is something that Congress can pass. But what the Biden administration is trying to do is they're trying to take advantage of very narrow exceptions and rip it as wide open as they can to get as much forgiveness for borrowers as possible. So, and I wrote in Newsweek that this is wasting our time. The Biden administration should move on to something else because, like, from a legal aspect, it may not pass. Like, this is during an election year, a very tight election year, too. If the Biden administration were to get a second term, it's likely going to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has made it clear that it does not like loan forgiveness. On the other hand, if a Republican administration were to take over, loan for this is getting off the table. It's going to get rescinded. Meanwhile, the administration has a much more immediate problem on their hands. We have a fiasco with issuing with issuing federal student aid to students right now. The Biden administration tried to roll out this updated FAFSA form. FAFSA is free application for federal student aid. That's how students apply for financial assistance to attend college. The rollout has been messy. It's been riddled with errors. 500,000 students, so 27% of students of high school students have not filed their FAFSA forms. And we don't know if they're going to go to college or if they're going to do something else. So there's an immediate problem.
This is because of mismanagement at the Department of Education, right?
Yeah, and they've been too focused on loan forgiveness, and it has a very narrow path, which is why I say it's a waste of our time.
Mm-hmm. I loved your title on the Newsweek column. Biden needs to give up on student loan forgiveness, and that hits them right between the eyes with it. But it seems to me that the state of our politics right now is that they don't care whether anything that they're proposing will become law or whether it would work or not. It's just it's almost better for them to be seen fighting for something that horrible opposition party is resisting.
I mean, he's trying to fulfill a campaign promise. It's quite embarrassing that the administration couldn't fulfill that promise, and it got struck down by the Supreme Court back in 2023. So I can see why the administration is so committed to getting this loan forgiveness. But again, there's so many people who are looking for federal student aid. They just want that smooth transition between high school and college. Mm-hmm. And for many, they don't even know where they're going to college right now or whether they're getting federal aid and how much. So this is a very real problem that students and families are currently facing.
We're talking to Neetu Arnold. She is a research fellow at the National Association of Scholars and a Young Voices contributor. So the National Association of Scholars is, you guys are doing education, like think tank work?
So we do education research. We produce reports on a variety of topics. I've actually written about the student debt issue before in a report Priced Out. So, it's a very extensive report. I mean, I spoke with 50 students, people who didn't go to college, parents, college administrators, to really get a range of views of why people go to college, why people take on debt. For those who don't go to college, what are the benefits? What are the hardships? So that's one unique aspect of that report. We also go through some of the theories of why college became so expensive. You'll hear a lot of different arguments over why college costs increase, whether that's because of federal subsidies or because universities are not getting enough state funds. And so we really break down for people the different theories that exist and going through the research so that people have the information on their hands.
Well, wait a sec. Why should any university get state funds?
Well, I think what college administrators would argue is that that's how these universities serve a public purpose, so that there's an investment. It's seen as an investment. It's seen as an opportunity. I know that there's another side that would say more subsidies is the reason that colleges are so expensive, and that they're losing their purpose. They're expanding to activities that are outside the scope. I mean, think of the proverbial lazy river. But we also see colleges spending more on recruitment services, which is more of an external role rather than helping the students on their campus. So but
hang on a sec. Those arguments sound like they're coming from the big government crowd who thinks that government should be controlling everything inside of of universities, even though they're private, non-governmental entities. And it seems clear that if you pump a lot of government money into private, non-governmental entities and disrupt the marketplace, that is, put a lot of demand into the marketplace by giving kids subsidies to go to college, that's going to increase demand for space in colleges. But you've got a fixed number of spaces. That drives up the cost. Isn't that just basic economics?
I mean, the current way we view education funding, it is anti-competitive. So it makes it really hard for, if you want new institutions to enter the market, or if we want alternatives to education, it's definitely harder. And these universities, they have a lot of money. They have a lot of lobbying power. So, yes, I think it contributes to an anti-competitive environment.
So it seems to me the government, this is another area where government has stepped in where it shouldn't have been, and it's made a mess of things. And when government makes a mess, it makes a mess that only government is big enough to deal with, that's their sweet spot, so they can run in and be the saviors. And it seems like that's what Joe Biden is trying to do. If we could just change people's mindsets a little bit so they would understand that anytime the government says they're coming to help, that means disaster is what's going to ensue, and to just say no and resist.
I mean, I hold a slightly different view. So,
all right, I was hoping you would.
Well, I mean, the way I see it, so I don't necessarily like big government, but I can see where sometimes government involvement can be useful. If we need to, I guess if we have a shortage of supply, like let's say in apprentices, that's where government money can help. But what I don't like is when we become too reliant on those government funds and there aren't safeguards in place. I mean, that's the problem even with the student loan system. We just hand out money without considering whether those students can finish school. I mean, we don't do that in any other industry. We
right. In other words, the kids get the money to go to college, and they might drop out, and then they have the debt, and they don't have a diploma, which is supposed to increase their earnings and justify the debt they're taking on. That's what you're talking about, right? So,
right,
excuse me one second. I just wanted to say, as I read you putting those arguments in, isn't it crazy for government to give loans to students to go to college and then not make sure that the college is going to be able to provide them enough income to pay the loans back and stuff like that? And you're right that it makes no sense to do those things, but it makes worse no sense to invite the government to provide a regulatory scheme to protect its tampering with the market, which is only going to make the market worse.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, I also recall that one of the reasons the government did become more involved with higher education, this was during the 50s and 60s. We needed more people with knowledge in foreign languages or STEM fields. So, and there just weren't enough college-educated people. But where I think it gets out of control is when we use explanations from 30, 40 years ago where the environment was just different. The conditions were just different. And we still say, well, we still need the funding today. We still don't have enough educated people, when that's not clearly the case. So there's some pros and cons with government involvement here. And also the fact that it's like we need to update our understanding. We can't just operate on justifications from decades ago.
But I want to run through these arguments, if you don't mind, a little bit, because I don't see any place where government intervenes to provide some kind of assistance where we don't see disaster that ensues. Any little program they make to provide a little bit of support to somebody for something turns into them becoming this Goliath regulator of something that it has no business in, that drives people out. Even if it's a simple thing like providing licenses for people to become cutters of hair. And if you're going to be a cutter of hair, you have to go to school for a couple of years. And they do this just to rig the haircutting industry so they can charge more for haircuts. I mean, there's just no justification for what they do. And I don't see, can you point to something where you can see that government has intervened and we've benefited? And you don't have to answer that if you nothing pops in your head. I don't want to put you on the spot, but in my experience, I look at everything government does and say they've made a mess here, and we can't afford the old messes, and they're still proposing expanded messes and new messes.
I'll say this. So I think one industry where we do see government involvement, but it's actually not enough, is the apprenticeship arena. There's been a lot of interest in getting apprenticeships up and running, but it's usually hard to get employers involved. Part of it is costs, but also they don't see the benefits of apprenticeships. And also employers were under this notion that a college degree signifies that somebody has skills for their particular work. Mm-hmm. So I would say this is an instance where we actually need more apprentices. We need more people in the skilled trades, but we don't have that right now. And one of the reasons, a company might want to get registration is a process that allows companies or organizations to get grant funding. It's so that they can fund apprentices. Unless you're an organization that has a lot of money on hand, this is where the grant funding could come handy. So I could see government funds, giving a boost to an industry that just isn't getting enough of attention, especially when you have, higher education that's really anti-competitive. So I guess my problem is when we have policies, again, from decades ago, and and the government hasn't caught up. It's still going off of older notions of
just from different eras, different policy eras. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So just tell me a little bit more before we wrap up. We're talking with Neetu Arnold. This apprenticeship idea, what kind of industry is it where apprentices are needed? And I'm assuming the apprentice is kind of an in-between where you're learning the job and you're acting as a helper and making some kind of medium salary compared to the people you're helping.
Right. It's a way to earn while you learn. And, there's the notion that apprenticeships are just for people working in construction, but there's actually some up and coming industries that could use apprentices, including IT, finance, and healthcare. These are some of the areas, at least when I spoke with people in the trade school industry, they were telling me that these are some of the areas where they need a lot more workers and they don't have enough right now. And there's this idea that you just need to go to college to learn how to code, which you don't need 4 years to learn how to code. So I would say these are some of the industries that we're going to see more demand, but we need more supply. We need more incentives to get people into these fields.
All right, just because of my suspicion of government, Neetu, I don't know anything about apprenticeships, but I'm going to read up on it. I just pulled up something quick from apprenticeship.gov. Mm-hmm. Apprenticeships have helped build America from its early beginnings to the present day. Among the early apprentices who went on to national distinction were George Washington, Ben Franklin, Paul Revere, thousands of others. Carpenters, masons, shipwrights did their part in developing and supporting the economy of our young nation and making the U.S. what it is today. Then now I start to get nervous with the next paragraph. In 1937, the National Apprenticeship Act, also known as the Fitzgerald Act, was signed into law establishing the registered apprenticeship program as it is today. The NAA permitted the U.S. Department of Labor to issue regulations protecting the health, safety, and general welfare of apprentices, as well as preventing racial, ethnic, religious, age, and gender discrimination in those programs. And you can see already, nearly 100 years ago, the government laying down the bricks in the path that would destroy the ability of apprenticeships to be manageable and agile enough to survive, because they start piling on these special favors for special interest groups that become impediments to survival. That's just a quick off the top of my head, pulling it right off the internet.
Okay,
Warning.
I can see why there would be certain regulations in place, especially in fields like construction, where there is an aspect of safety. But again, I do think when it comes to apprenticeship registration, I think it's an issue of updating the laws and making sure that it's beneficial for other industries that are looking to hire more apprentices, that are looking for more trades. But I'll look into what you've just brought up a little bit more.
I wish you would, because they screw everything up, the government does. It makes a disaster out of everything. Look at public education. I believe that we will never recover from the selling of education policy off to unions. And that's now, we have no control over our schools because the unions decide what happens there. We can't control our police. And when there's a problem police officer, he can't be eliminated from the police department because they've got the same kind of bureaucracies and union protections that they have in the schools. It's just one area after another where our society is being consumed by the inefficiencies that aren't supposed to be there because we're supposed to be capitalists, but we've got this huge bureaucratic state now that ruins everything, it seems.
I mean, I can see what you're saying. Again, I'm not a big fan of expanding government, so I'm with you there. I'm just not entirely. It has no role. That's usually where I stand. But I see what you're saying.
Look, I'm not trying to make you bend to my demands here. You're really smart and you're young, and it's a dangerous combination because you might think that people in the power structure have actually done something good and intend to do something good, and I see no signs of either of those things. So I'm just giving you my cynical old guy's perspective on things. Neetu Arnold is a research fellow at the National Association of Scholars. We just have 30 seconds left. Say what you were going to say.
Oh, I was just saying that I appreciate your point of view. And again, I think going back to loan forgiveness, we really need to get back and ensure that the people, we need to make sure that we're setting conditions on those loans if we are going to have the federal loan system. Either that or we get rid of the federal student loan system. There are different options we have, but I think we need to make sure that it at least works efficiently.
All right. Neetu, you are awesome. It's so much fun to talk with you. Thank you for going around this with me.
Thank you.
All right. Check out Neetu's column. It's really good. It's called Biden Needs to Give Up on Student Loan Forgiveness. It's in Newsweek. Neetu, we'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All righty. We're going to break for news and talk some more coming up on WTIC.